You just had to have been there. I could try to explain it, and I'm gonna try to explain it, but if you weren't there, it it can't quite ever hit the way it hits for me. And I'm sure there are things in your life that I wasn't there for, and all the words in the world wouldn't help me to understand what you feel. What I'm talking about is, when Eddie Murphy came on, I got all serious, like a really deep thing. When Eddie Murphy broke on the scene, that was a deep thing. 11-year-old me, 12-year-old me, 13-year-old me, 14-year-old me. I feel like I was an early adopter of Eddie Murphy, man. The guy just came out fully formed, 19 years old. Within, I think, 2 months of becoming a featured player on SNL, it becomes a cast member. Starts in November, January 10th, 1981, out of nowhere, right? He's so good. He's so fully formed. They are 4 minutes short on material. SNL has 4 minutes of dead air, and they send the 19-year-old Eddie Murphy out there to riff. Now, he's not just riffing, only riffing. He had a great little bit that he did on his at his audition, so he wasn't empty-handed. But can you imagine 19 years old? They go, "You're clearly on another level than all of us, and we're all on TV." Like that next level. Man. So I'm 10, 11 years old. I can't say I was in on the first year, but definitely by the time I'm like 6th, 7th, 8th grade, fighting to stay awake. And as I got older, it was easier. I mean, doing. I can remember staying up late to watch SNL and just writing down the bits, little rectangular uh uh notepad, pencil, writing down the things, like watching it, laughing, writing it down, because on Monday I was going in Sinaloa Middle School, my buddy Russ, and we would just do lines. We would run Eddie Murphy bits back and forth, all of it. Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood, James Brown, Celebrity Hot Tub, Mr. White, Mr. White. Oh my God, what a silly Negro. All of it. All of it. 1982, he breaks out. Absolutely, the first buddy cop movie is 48 Hours. Nick Nolte, Eddie Murphy. Eddie's a con that let out on a 48-hour pass. I don't need show notes for this. I know this one. He's doing time in San Quentin, part of a gang that gets busted. They want help tracking down Gans. And Gans is a bad, bad man. He and Billy Bear broke out, and they give a little pass, 48-hour pass, and a beautiful Armani suit to Reggie Hammond doing time in San Quentin for robbery. I think it was San Quentin. Anyway, I got a card to show you. Can you tell I love 48 hours? Oh man, here we go. From Barcelona, Spain. It's the Video Guay series. This is the Eddie Murphy rookie card you're looking at, friends. 1984. Of course, the film is 1982, made in Barcelona. Video Guay, 144 card set, all about Hollywood movies. This is the Eddie Murphy RC PSA. Awesome. Love this card. I'm going to describe it for you listening on the podcast. It's sort of an animated, drawn buddy, Nolte on one side, this big old like handgun revolver shoving right in the face of the camera, and then the same also has his arms extended. Eddie, big old flipping the bird. I've seen this poster before. They didn't run this one in the States, but Europe actually has this as their movie poster. Of course, little puritanical, repressed Americans. This man, Eddie Murphy. Well, non-sports cards here for you today on the Rated Rabbi Sports Card Podcast, where sports cards and pop culture meet the 1984 All-Star Game. I'm your host, Rabbi David Spinrad. Welcome to episode 39. Eddie Murphy, Don Drysdale, and Presidential Assassins. Let's get back to Eddie. 1983 follows it up. Valentine, Trading Places with Aykroyd. Amazing. Great movie. I feel like as good as it is, it gets slept on because everyone knows 48 Hour, and there's the major Hollywood leap where he's the lead coming up in '84. We'll talk about that in a minute. Trailblazers is awesome. It's an A, but I don't feel like it gets quite the attention that it deserves. It's actually really holds up. I highly recommend it. So he leaves SNL, 1984, end of the season. All-Star Game, July 10th, 1984. A movie is just about to hit the theaters called Best Defense. You don't know this movie? You should know this movie. It is one of the great bombs of all time. Metacritic gave it 29 out of 100. Rotten Tomatoes hates it. It is such a bad movie. Check it out. The movie is so bad that it was actually completed and they realized how bad it was and they got Eddie and shot scenes separate from the movie to try to make it a little bit better than the big steaming turd that it was. It's a story about Dudley Moore, who plays a defense contractor, a shoddy one, doing not a contractor, an engineer doing designing tanks. And what sounds like a great idea. Dudley Moore is going to be a tank designer designing bad tanks. It's a comedy. So I don't know, dude, we'll bring in Eddie Murphy. 2 years later, the tanks are being deployed. They're in Kuwait. Something malfunctions with the tank in '84, goes into Iraq. Slightly prescient, don't you think? So such a bad movie. Here, I got a still from it. I would tell you to check it out, but it's just that bad. 1984 Best Defense. So bad. It's not even like it's so bad it's good. It's just bad. Great quote from Eddie. He comes back to do the Christmas show in 1984 December. Let me bring up that quote. Here's Eddie in the opening monologue. He said, "After I did 48 Hours in Trading Places, all these scripts started coming my way from everywhere, and I picked up a script called Best Defense. There's a movie that sucked real bad. At first, I wasn't going to do it because I read the script and I felt like I was an actor at first. But the money they gave me to do Best Defense, y'all would have done Best Defense too, okay?" I was like, "What? How dare you give me a script like this?" "Oh, that much money? Let's go." Then he goes on to say, "Best Defense turned out to be the worst movie ever done in the history of anything. And all of a sudden, I wasn't that hot no more. So I called up the producer of Saturday Night Live and I go, you still got my dressing room?" I don't know. It's got a kick out of that. Doing riffing on Eddie Murphy, Best Defense, 1984. Of course, 10 days before he hosted that '84 SNL, Beverly Hills Cop, which was his first solo movie, hits the theater. Then, the rest is history. Okay, question before we move on from Eddie Murphy. Eddie's killing it in the '80s. '83, he does a concert film, right? That's called Delirious. They release it simultaneously as a tape, and it's called Comedian, same content. '87, that's the red leather suit. '87 is the purple leather suit. That's Eddie Murphy Raw. He does several other movies like Golden Child. I want to ask you something. When does that era of Eddie Murphy, it's not like you can do like sub eras. When does that first era of Eddie Murphy end? Begins with SNL, 48 Hours, Beverly Hills Cop, Trading Places, of course, right? It has an end. And it's not Harlem Nights in 1989. That is the next. That's almost like Bamidbar. That's almost when he got a little lost in the desert. Occasionally, something like Boomerang would hit you, but mostly it was real forgettable. And I think third generation is when he became a family movie guy, doing things like Dr. Dolittle, Daddy Daycare. But when is the era? When is like when Eddie end? If you said 1988 Coming to America, you'd be absolutely correct. It's a great movie. Plays all those characters. He's brilliant. I actually feel like he doesn't get his due for that movie. The last great Eddie Murphy moment in that era. That's the end of it right there. Coming to America. Let me know what you think. Or even better than that, let me know who one of your guys or gals is. Who is somebody who influenced you? You know I'm an Eddie guy. I'd love to be able to claim Richard Pryor, one of the coolest ever, but it's forced. It's before my time. People used to rip on Eddie for being like Pryor, but I didn't know from that. Pryor was already in Superman 2, you know? Who was your guy? Maybe a singer, maybe a band, maybe an athlete, maybe a movie star. Eddie was the end of childhood and the beginning of adolescence, is what Eddie was for me. Eddie ended childhood and began my adolescence. Coming out of the commercial break, hey, into the top half of the fourth inning, we've got Don Drysdale interviewing Charlie Lee. One of those typical interviews where you can ask him a bunch of like, how'd you feel out there kind of questions, but a couple things I want to raise up for you. All right, first, look at that beautiful starter jacket Charlie Lee is wearing. The blue, the red collar. That's awesome. Green screen behind them both, but there's nothing on the green screen, so it's just like a green wall. Drysdale wearing the network jacket, the blazer with the ABC badge over the left breast. And Drysdale himself, man, like his tall, strapping, handsome Californian, 6'5" from Van Nuys, fireball and right-handed pitcher. Fearless Sal Magley, when they pitched together in Brooklyn, Sal Magley taught him the brushback, and he was intimidating out there. Definitely the number 2 to Koufax, but you can make a real good argument that the story of the '60s has to include Drysdale. Let's run down his career numbers: 209 and 166, career ERA of 2.95, won a Cy Young in 1962, 8-time All-Star. Hit 7 home runs in 2 different seasons, including hitting 7 in their World Series winning 1965 year. Also hit 300 for the Dodgers that year, the only Dodger that season to hit 300 or better. Clearly the number 2. No one says he was better than Koufax, but what a 1-2 combo. As I was researching this episode, I did a little dive into Koufax, and I knew a little bit about the story, but I learned a lot more. 1966, they're coming off a World Series win. The Dodger way was they only signed guys to 1-year contracts. Drysdale and Koufax and Drysdale, Boychik and Deshegesla, they come together and hold out as a pair. 2 stronger than 1. This is the time there's still the reserve clause in MLB. If you didn't pitch for your team or play for your team, you simply did not play. But LA, Buzzy Bavasi knew that wasn't going to work. Too popular, World Series champion, the 2 best starters. They wanted a raise. You know what they wanted? They wanted a total of $1 million over 3 seasons combined. Sure. Yeah, no problem. I'll give you cash. Nowadays, $1 million, $500,000 for Koufax, $500,000 for Drysdale. They want $1 million combined over 3 seasons. Would have been $165,000 a piece. You know what's amazing is here's an example of the money being not only different but also experienced differently. Could you imagine nowadays a number 1, a Koufax, saying, "I'll take the same as the number 2. We'll do it together"? Maybe it's Koufax's character. I like to think so, but I think also, like, nowadays, could you ever imagine him saying, "No, we'll just ask for exact same amount of money"? And actually, as evidenced, when they finally do sign, Koufax gets 135,000 and Drysdale gets 105. So Koufax is a better pitcher, but when they hold out together, they do it for 32 days, February 28th to the end of March 1966. They're doing it for equal money, even though Koufax was the better pitcher. Kind of the first union, right? The first time players came together, at least pitchers that I know of, 1966, the union moved before the union stronger together. How about another thing about Koufax? 1968. I feel like I want to do a dive and just do a dive in that entire year of the pitcher. So 1962 MLB, they raise the mound from 10 to 15 inches and they make the strike zone bigger. So all through the 60s, you see actually some really low, really depressed offensive numbers. And the zenith is 1968, right? Yaz is the only player to hit 300. Is that's triple crime where? Someone leave me a message. I'm riffing on that one. Yeah, I think 68. Uh, check out these pitching numbers. Danny McClain becomes the last player to win, last pitcher to win 30, wins 31, the first since Dizzy Dean in the 30s. I think it's safe to say we'll never see another 30-game winner in our lifetime. Danny McClain, man. Louis Tiant, American League, has a 1.6 ERA. Opposing hitters hit a paltry 168. What else? Catfish Hunter throws a perfect game. As if that's not enough, how about Gaylord Perry throws a no-hitter against the St. Louis Cardinals? And the very next day, St. Louis Cardinal pitcher Ray Washburn also throws a no-hitter. Back-to-back no-hitters is so cool. Who else? Like you're like, knucklehead. What about Gibby? Absolutely, man. Gibson has the greatest of all the great seasons in 1968. Everyone knows. What's his ERA? What's his ERA? You don't need to tell me it's 1.12. It's like a number everybody knows. 1.12 ERA. But not only that, starts 34 games. 34 starts, those 28 complete games, and 13 shutouts. I'll say that again. Sit with that. Starts 34 games, throws 304 innings. In those 34 starts, has 28 complete games and 13 shutouts. That's insane, right? His record's 22-9. That's like the least interesting thing to me. Oh my God. Opposing hitters, he held them to a 0.85 whip. Man, oh man, oh man, Bob Gibson. I think it would be fun to do a little dive into 68, get some cards from that season. But I'm going to talk about Don Drysdale. We've done all the other pitchers of note. Drysdale throws not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, but 6 consecutive shutouts in the 1968 season. 6 consecutive shutouts starting in May and going through the 5th of June. Shuts out Chicago, Houston, St. Louis, Houston again, San Francisco, and Pittsburgh, thereby establishing a record that held from 1968 to 1988 and stands to this day. Drysdale, 58 2/3 shutout innings, only to be broken also by a Dodger, Oral Hershiser. Drysdale, 58 2/3 shutout innings. Retires after the 69 season. Does a little bit of acting. Did a 1962 appearance as himself on Leave It to Beaver. 1970 episode called The Dropout. Greg wants to become a major league pitcher. He heard someone thinks he has the stuff, so he wants to drop out of school and become just like a real big-headed jerk. It was not the Brady way, right? The Brady were nice to each other, but Greg was getting a little too big for his britches, wants to drop out of the school, wants to make it the show. Drysdale comes on. There's a picture of him. It's funny that the celebrity photo from the studio actually doesn't have Greg in it. It has Mike Lookinland, of course, Mike Brady, has Peter, has Bobby, and Drysdale right in the middle. They're all looking at the baseball together for those of you listening at home or in your car. I have a couple of baseball cards to show you. 1969 Topps issues Brady Bunch cards. Check these out. This one here, very much like the 1962 wood grain panel. That's clear. You've got Peter as the catcher, and the caption with Bobby putting a thumb to his chest saying, "I'm the umpire." Looks like a little couch behind them playing baseball. Other one I think I like a little bit more. Greg and Peter looking up at his big brother Greg, and Greg a pitcher, of course, on his team, and the caption here says, "Here comes my fastball." Horizontal cars look like television sets, kind of a little bit of a hybrid between the 62 Topps and the 55 Bowman. Now, if you can see in this card of Greg and Peter, he's got the green T hat and the baseball three-quarter sleeve shirt, green with the white middle. I tried to photo match it with the episode, and I thought for a second, but unfortunately, uh, Peter is wearing the wrong kind of shirt, wrong color shirt. So I don't think it's a photo match from the episode, this card, but it's nevertheless, it makes me really happy. Oof. Oh, you want to see the back of the card? It's a puzzle. There's little puzzle pieces to show you. Uh, Not that exciting. It's all about the front. It's all about the Brady's. When else did Don Drysdale do acting? Well, he was everywhere. You know, he didn't have the most range. Mostly he played himself. Let me show you that he also, in season 2, episode 1 is called The 200-Mile Fastball of early 80s. Pretty fun show called The Greatest American Hero. There he is holding up the costume. That's William Catt, played a high school teacher, Ralph Hinckley. Aliens make contact with him. They give him a super suit, tell him to do good things, try to save the world. Only problem is, this is the running joke, is Ralph Hinckley loses the instruction kit. So he couldn't exactly know what to do with the suit and had to figure it out as he went. A lot of crashes, a lot of physical comedy, but discovered it had a great powers. Who else was in that? Robert Culp. Remember Robert Culp, TV star. I Spy with Bill Cosby. Who else? Connie Selica, baby. You remember Connie Selica? More from Hotel, right? I was like Connie Selica. She's right at that place where like Jewish girls and Ashkenazi girls and Italian girls kind of look alike. So Ashkenazi Jewish girls and Italian girls are kind of like, I think there's like crossover right there. Just a little bit different, but very, very, very similar. Connie Selica always had that very definitely Italian, but might be Jewish vibe. Anyway, so he plays himself. Don Drysdale, episode 2. William Catt is trying to save the day. There's some crooks beat up the star player of a baseball team, and he comes in and to be the pitcher, so the crooks lose their money on the bet. Again, I do this research, so you don't have to. Let me tell you another little tidbit about Greatest American Hero. As I mentioned, the character played by William Catt, his name was Ralph Hinckley. March 1981, John Hinckley Jr. tries to assassinate President Ronald Reagan. You didn't know I was good at presidential assassinations. It's right there in the title, friends. Eddie Murphy, Don Drysdale, and presidential assassinations. So bear with me. And I totally remember. John F. Hinckley tries to kill Reagan because he has an obsession with Jodie Foster, particularly from watching the movie Taxi Driver, where it's actually like it's a super sad movie. She's a 12-year-old kid being sex trafficked, and he just felt like infatuated with her, and it's a real sad story. A lot of mental health things. Came from a very wealthy family. Did John Hinckley? The Hinckley Energy. His dad was in oil. His dad like owned oil fields, so didn't lack for anything. Never really found his way in life. Suffered from some mental health things. Actually moved. When Jodie Foster goes to Yale. Talk about a psychopath. John Hinckley goes and moves to New Haven and kind of like stalks her at Yale. And then he's thinking like, well, if I do something big, I'll be famous like her, and she'll like somehow will be equals, or she'll be attracted to me. He thought about actually hijacking a plane. That was an option. But instead he tried to kill the president. Thank God the assassination attempt, it failed. But as an outcome of the attempted assassination, ABC decides to change the name. And no longer is it Ralph Hinckley. It becomes either Ralph Handley, right? Handley, Ralph Handley, or more often the students just call him Mr. H, Ralph Handley or Mr. H. A little time went on, then went back to Hinckley. But just thought I'd mention that presidential assassination because it ties into, if you noticed in the show notes, I said we had assassinations. Don Drysdale is found dead of a heart attack in his hotel room. The Center Sheraton up in Montreal. He's an announcer for the Dodgers at the time. He's found dead of a heart attack, 1993. Vince Scully has to announce it live on the air. He caught the hardest thing he'd ever had to do as a broadcaster. Among Drysdale's possessions that were found on him in that lonely hotel room was a cassette tape. A cassette tape from the victory speech by Robert Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy's acceptance speech after he won the California primary and said, now it's on to Chicago. And then he was assassinated by Sirhan, a Palestinian separatist who wanted to bring attention to the plight of the Palestinians in Israel. Sirhan successfully and tragically assassinates RFK. And you're asking yourself, where did we go and why did this get so dark? No, this is actually really important. No sound, this is important. On Drysdale's belongings, they find a cassette tape of this 1968 California primary victory acceptance speech by Kennedy. And at the start of the speech, right, what was the date? The date was June 5th, 1968. And one of the first things Bobby Kennedy says is, he says, I understand Don Drysdale threw another shutout tonight. He actually is in LA and has the presence and is tuned in. That is baseball, man. It's our pastime. And Kennedy, when he opens his remarks, notes that night Drysdale had thrown his sixth straight shutout, 58 and 2/3 consecutive innings. So I hate to bring assassinations on what I always hope to be a joyful journey through the 1980s, but I was just so touched by that detail that Drysdale carried that cassette tape of Kennedy making note of his success as a big leader, of his sixth straight shutout, that he carried a cassette tape of that speech on his belonging for the rest of his days. That's a good place to end. So thank you so much. If you're enjoying this, please leave a comment, like, and subscribe. Better than all of that, tell somebody, invite them along. Until we meet again, may you enjoy and may you be blessed with health and with long life. So long for now.